Monster Hunter Wild has taken over my life for the past 2 weeks, and all I've been wanting to do is just blast through it again and again to get weapons and armor sets. It's been well worth the wait, and personally I don't see anything knocking this off my top spot for Game of the Year. It already has a roadmap for monsters coming in the future, and while I need to wait for that, it doesn't take away from the fact that this game gripped me right away and held me hostage. So, let's talk about Monster Hunter Wilds. You can play Monster Hunter for hundreds or thousands of hours, but you can only experience the story for the first time once, so I'm not going to give away too much about what happens and just touch on some small things. But me personally, I liked the story. The overall story was interesting and certainly has moments that feel impactful and hyped up. I think the game focuses a little too much on Nata, which is a child you rescue at the beginning of the game, and this hinders moments because of how he acts. Personally, I think it's difficult to write young characters well because if they're authentically childlike, then they are emotional about things and whiny. But if you take away these traits, you make this beyond their years of wisdom type character, which are equally insufferable. But while Nata hinders these moments, the cast of characters that you have on the journey are guild related. So they're more calm and calculated and are excited about exploring this new area and hunting. But Monster Hunter isn't known for having these jaw-dropping stories, it's known for the gameplay and the monsters. Let's focus in on the monsters first, as they are the true stars of the show. In Wilds we meet a varied cast of monsters ranging from slightly bigger than your size to colossal beasts that each and every move throw damage your way. But it isn't just about the size of the monsters, it's about the speed at which they move to close the distance, attacks they throw out in a flurry, be that raw damage or some form of elemental projectile, or even just the fact some monsters leave you having to deal with status effects after a single hit. They come in many shapes and forms with differences that make learning the patterns and understanding how the creatures operate a blast to learn. For example, Katakabra is there as a raw damage monster with multiple weaknesses to allow players to click with the mechanics of the game. He's an introduction monster that telegraphs his attacks openly and has very few mix-ups that will lead to you dying. Then you've got Kimetris, who also telegraphs their attacks to give hunters plenty of time to evade, but can inflict fire blight that will slowly tick down your health, but you learn you can remove this by rolling. After that they introduce you to Balahara, a leviathan monster that can swim under the sand and climb up stone structures and spit this muddy like water at you, which will give you water blight, which causes your stamina to recover 1/3 of the speed. This can be cured by a nullberry or just waiting the timer out, but if you have a stamina based weapon, this is hindering your fighting. Balahara also moves differently, so predicting attacks might prove more difficult after the straight 1v1s you had before. Once you will leave the Windward Plains to venture into the Scarlet Forest, you're met with Lala Barina, which dances around having delayed strikes, quick jabs to throw hunters off the rhythm of the fight. It pairs this off with an attack where it scatters flowers that softly float down, and it hides between them. But if you touch one of these flowers, you're left paralysed, leaving you vulnerable to attack. And Kungalala, which is a pink ape-like monster that burps and farts on you, and when inflicted with this stench prevents you from using healing items or stamina related items. This can be removed by using deodorant, but if you can't, you're forced into a dodge playstyle until you can remedy the stench. This isn't from the perspective of someone with plenty of game time across Monster Hunter entries, but more of an explanation of how this fight can feel if you aren't as confident with fighting monsters. And these are just a few of the early monsters, and there is plenty more, but later on you get to duke it out with the apex monsters that are locked to one location, and when they arrive the area changes up. Raydao causes a region-wide thunderstorm, Ufduna is accompanied by a downpour, Nuudra is surrounded by burning heat in the oil wells, and Jindahad roams inside the Frostwinds. I really like the addition of adding apex monsters, as it allows each region to have this mighty monster that shows up and changes the environment. And without a shadow of a doubt, Raydao is the coolest new addition because, to put it simply, it's a railgun monster. Ufduna I find lacking in every sense of the word. Its only redeeming feature is the downpour you fight in. Nuudra, I like the design, but the fight is underwhelming for how much limbs it can be hitting you with. I really hope they dial that up with the aggression for Master Rank, or maybe some patches. And Jindahad I think has an awesome design, and the fight as it changes from location to location, and these set moments where you can do some beefy damage and suffer being carried if you aren't paying attention. kind of adds to the magnitude of the actual fight. I really enjoyed that. I also love that they put them in this order, as if you use the previous Apex monster's weapon against the next Apex monster, it's doing extra damage due to weaknesses. With monsters having these elemental properties, it makes using specific elements against them a smart option that can help you dump extra damage while also gearing yourself up with elemental resistances to prevent you from taking as much damage. As you fight these monsters, you'll acquire parts from them from breaks, severings, capturing or slaying the monster and harvesting from the body. These materials are then used to craft your weapons for better raw damage or elemental damage, and craft new gear. And in that is where the gameplay loop lies. You hunt, get maybe 2 pieces of gear made up, decide you want the full set and the weapon, and you go hunt it another 2 to 5 times to require the materials to complete that set, before running into the next monster and realizing, you can make a nice new pair of boots out of those. While on paper this sounds mundane and time consuming, it doesn't feel that way in the fight. You learn monsters' patterns, improve with weapons, and fall into this flow state where the hunt feels effortless. It might seem a bit weird that I spoke about monsters and weapons before the actual gameplay, but that's because they're the stars of the show, and the reason for hunting them. But Wilds has these tight controls that you can pick up and figure out rather quickly. In World I played only the Insect Glaive, and in Rise I played the Longsword. So as tradition goes, I choose one main weapon, and because there's a 2-weapon system, I chose a secondary, being the Charge Blade and the Dual Blades. Now, most of my game time has been with the Charge Blade as I played that solo and with friends, but another friend couldn't play so much, so I chose to play Dual Blades and upgrade at the same time they did. Dual Blades is filled with flips and slits and slashes and clips of people doing the Levi spin. It's all the weapon really has going for it, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, you can enjoy it and it's not a bad weapon, but its lack of range and chip damage just doesn't do it for me. The Charge Blade, on the other hand, I think is awesome and so much fun to work around its mechanics. The weapon starts off as a sword and shield that acts as such, but you can also combine them together to create an extended kind of weapon, more like an axe. While in this state, it has further reach and heavier damage as the shield fits onto the end of the sword. The sword, the shield, and the combined form can get individual buffs that allow you to have an after impact when you hit. For example, when any are buffed, you can hit with the weapon and the spot you hit combusts with extra damage. Also, when having files loaded, you can dump them all at once or whatever remains for a single attack that blasts through the monster. Just to be completely transparent, what you might notice about some of the gameplay I have shown is that I haven't had the sword buffed, and that's because I didn't Google how to use Charge Blade, or go into the training area and figure everything out that I could do. I simply played, and I learned on the fly, and I like it that way. You don't come out the gate swinging with optimal damage, you miss time attacks and gauge distances wrong until it clicks, and you unleash combos of damage that all hit and it feels earned. Not saying you can't go into the training area or Google how it works, but for me, that isn't how I like to play. I will say that the game is too easy. Obviously people can say I've played 2 other Monster Hunter games to completion and that might be why it's light work, but overall I don't believe that's entirely it. It just feels too forgiving, and I believe I have to play stupid with constant damage and not dodging to cart with 90% of the monsters. Each location carries its own unique identity as you explore, from the sandy rocks of the Windward Plains to the lush beauty of the Scarlet Forest, the intense heat of the Oilwall Basin and the cold isolation of the Ice Shard Cliffs. Each location differs from the other, and houses specific monsters that are only to be found in their locations. While the Scarlet Forest stands out as the most beautiful due to its range of deep greens and reds with a stream of blue flowing through it, and packed with tons of endemic life, it's far from the only place with beauty to it. I personally favour the Windward Plains when lightning's crashing down around you, leaving you or monsters vulnerable to be hit at any time if not dodged. There's also a 5th location which spirals downwards from itself. These layers consist of rocky walled caves, a widespread of nature surrounding trees, and deep down a space for those who are curious with what this place is for. Now, I have a bunch of likes and some dislikes, but let's talk about the positives first. I absolutely adore Rove. Rove is a woodward, and woodward speak in this very simplistic tongue that more describes things instead of using names. Basically, each woodward you meet is rocking around with a single brain cell, because they gave them all to Rove so he can speak this Shakespearean masterclass of elegance. Rove is, without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite NPC in this entire game. Your Palico is an absolute unit, and honestly I felt like Clem was the main character the entire time I was playing. Personally, I think Palicos need to be tuned down because it's almost too helpful at times. I remember getting healed, then having a status effect removed, and then healed again, all in the span of 20 seconds. And that's just too much. It wasn't even that I was struggling, it just seemed that it was trying to remedy everything as fast as possible. This wasn't a once-off either, but regardless of this, your Palico is actually a nice addition to the story too. Hearing them ask if they can jump on the sacred with you, I was just like, dude, you don't need to ask, you're always welcome. I just really connected with the Palico in this game. Your Hunter is actually so badass in cutscenes, jumping from the ship onto the sacred to fend off the Balahara, firing a slinger shot with incredible accuracy, and the by my own order scene. I love that I'm so passionate about my nerdy hobbies because moments like these stick with you for so long. And as the game gives you control, you throw yourself into these colossal battles with the only option being kill or be killed. Alma is the handler of wilds, and I like that they gave her a name to make her more personable. She comes out into the field with you, gathering supplies that you can use mid-fight, and after slaying or capturing monsters, she rushes over to monsters while geeking out about her findings. These little animations and lines of dialogue give her some personality that is pleasant to see after the abomination that was the camp goblin handler from Monster Hunter World. Alma isn't there to hunt, she's there as an extension of the guild to research and a shot caller of the authorization to hunt monsters. So if you watched my wishlist video, you would have seen that technically 4 monsters I wanted made the cut, which is great because I was more than happy with just 1 making it into Wilds. So 1 was exactly what I wanted, with Gore Magala himself being this intense creature of destruction that inflicts madness on all that he corrupts. It's a little odd that they showed him in the trailer, but this reveal likely drummed up a lot of hype. 2 of them were variants of monsters off the list, which funnily enough are the ones I prefer. I only put their base versions on the list because I didn't think that they would put a variant in alone, but Fulgur and Ebony Odegaran found their way into this game, which I was so unbelievably hyped to see. And finally a Rathalos variant, which I personally think looks more menacing, but unfortunately it doesn't carry an elemental switch up. With that said though, it was a happy middle ground, and dons an incredible design that translates over to the weapons and armor well. And now for some dislikes. Artium weapons all look the same. They also have the same name, like they could have had a pool of names to pull from depending on if it's elemental status or if it's focused on more raw damage or the affinity. I just feel like this is a weird choice. Nata. It's not tough to find a reason to dislike him. He is that inserted child figure in game that has these deep understandings to what's happening and how monsters feel. Don't know, don't care. Nata is the worst part of this game. If the modding community could put as much effort into removing Nata as they do removing clothes, then it's like 90% of the game is fixed. The game prevents you from exploring at times. It just felt like I was taken to a new beautiful location with plenty of land to explore and enjoy, but I had a leash on and constantly held back from doing that. I felt like this choice might not have been that big an issue for others, but for me, I wanted to go and do that, and I just couldn't until later on. I felt like Capcom kind of stepped on their own feet with this one, but overall that's something I didn't like, and others might have enjoyed it because it got them into new locations and hunts faster. And maybe this is because the game was made more accessible and streamlined at parts, which if it gets more people into the franchise then fantastic, it's an incredible game, but sadly this wasn't for me. I dislike that in the marketing they decided to show off Gore Magala, and when you fight them it's a double monster fight. So you dive into that hunt and defeat that monster, and then you have to go deal with a side monster, which by that point in the game you can steamroll. This just made little sense to me as this monster carries this intensity and I was looking forward to it. But it isn't the only focus, like let the star be the star of the show. The low rank end boss Zoshia should have been the high rank end boss. It's the only fight like it in the whole game, and it has this incredible build up that gave me goosebumps with one of the hardest cutscenes playing out before you start the fight. It's insanely epic through and through and had me eager to fight it again and start grinding out the gear, which it doesn't have. On release till the first title update you can't redo the fight unless someone else is doing it or you start a new character. This was remedied with the first title update and came with weapons and armor sets that look incredible as you tackle Zoshia in a high rank showdown, but not having this on day one made Wilds feel unfinished. Monster Hunter Wilds is phenomenal and everything I wanted it to be. It has an interesting story in an unfamiliar location, beautiful environments and weather conditions that bring the setting to life, and a fantastic cast of monsters for you to hunt with a bunch of different weapons at your disposal. I never once thought for a second I wouldn't love this game when I finally got to sit down and play it, but it's such a wonderful feeling being reminded why I'm such a fan of this franchise. If you have sat through this and you're thinking about if you should buy the game, one thing I will say is don't let others gatekeep you from the series. Don't let others hinder your experience or have any say on what weapon you play. Go experiment, go try out new weapons on monsters you feel comfortable fighting, and above all else, just go have fun. It's a game and there's so much fun to be had, and the game is only going to get bigger over time, so enjoy it. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely day and or evening, and I'll catch you next time.